So in this recap, we are going to be showing a practical reason of moving anchor points. We're going to be setting up parenting, and that is linking layers together so that they move in unison and sort of allow for more complex animations. And then we're going to animate a quick wave, which was the assignment to be done in class. And then at the very end, we're going to sort of polish it and get it to that more cartoony, exaggerated, larger than life version of it. To get started, jump into the Illustrator file, and let's get going. You should have downloaded an Illustrator file. That Illustrator file will have a character, as you can see here. You don't need to do anything in Illustrator. The only thing you want to make sure is that your layers are named and working proper and stacked properly. As you can see, we have the bicep, forearm, hand, main character, which is the entire rest of the body, and then just a simple background. That's all we need to make sure is there, because this will reflect what is imported into After Effects. So let's jump into After Effects. There's 3 ways that you can import import files into After Effects. You can simply drag and drop into your project panel. You can go to File, Import, File right here, or the hotkey is Control-I. The way I usually do it is if you just double click an empty section, like empty space in this project panel, it will open up your import file dialog box. So you want to navigate to wherever you've saved your Illustrator file, and you want to hit import. Then you will get this sort of small window that pops up. The import kind you want to do as composition. So it will create a composition based on the artboard size of the Illustrator file. And then footage dimensions. You have 2 options here. You always want to do layer size, as that will create a smaller sort of bounding box, or the transform box will be to the actual layer. The document size will make everything the size of the artboard, which gets really complicated to animate with and to just work with in general. So with layer size selected, you want to hit OK. Now you can see we have a replica of the Illustrator file built in After Effects with all of these layers, much like we saw in the Illustrator file. That is why we would just want to check or make any changes in Illustrator before importing them into After Effects. With that, there's a quick thing that we can do. First, main character can be locked and background can be locked, as we aren't going to be touching those. And this will prevent us from maybe moving them or screwing up their position. Okay, so this is an added step. It's not necessary for this assignment, but I wanted to show you guys how and sort of the reasons why you would want to do this. So in this little thing, I have the hand that was imported in from Illustrator. So from this, you can create shape layers that are natively made in After Effects from Illustrator files. So what you do is you want to right click, go down to create, and then from create, you want to create shapes from vector layer. So when you click this, it will outline and create a duplicate of the hand, but using the native After Effects sort of shapes. So you're basically re-importing it or recreating it natively within After Effects. Why you might want to do something like this is twofold. Illustrator is a vector program and After Effects is a raster program. One works with math and one works with pixels. You get a sort of small issue when importing Illustrator files. Those Illustrator files, when scaled up or pushed beyond their bounds, get really blurry and sort of gross to look at or to use. And there are ways to mitigate this within After Effects, but it costs sort of performance in the program. Whereas if you outline your Illustrator files and you scale them up, they get sort of redrawn in a more clean fashion, or a fashion that is more pleasing. You don't get this blurry, pixelated mess, and it performs better and kind of doesn't bog down your program as much. Again, this isn't a necessary step, but it does help when rigging or using sort of files within After Effects. We will go through and just select the forearm, go down to create, and create shapes from vector layer, and do the same thing with the hand. So now we have 3 little stars instead of the AI symbol or the Illustrator symbol. So we can just hide these down at the bottom, as we are not going to use them. Alternatively, we can just delete them from our layer, or from our timeline. So now we have the hand, the forearm, and the bicep, and nothing has changed, which is great. There becomes a second benefit to using shape layers instead of Illustrator files. And I'm just gonna bring back the bicep layer to show you. So in a Illustrator file, everything is just one layer. It is just one clean picture. In After Effects, when you've created shape layers from it, you can see that it is actually multiple different shapes creating this one image, much like how you would draw it and how it was built in Illustrator. The benefit of this is that if we go to the pan behind tool, which is Y on your keyboard, and you move your anchor point and hold Control, you can see that you can start to snap to these shapes, the edges of these shapes, which is great for setting where it should rotate from. Whereas if I tried to do it with the Illustrator file, you can see no matter what I do or hold Control or Command, there's nothing for it to snap to other than these sort of the corners of the bounding box. So you can sort of guess where this has to go, and it will work. When you start to stack multiple arms and legs together in this fashion, it becomes hard to perfectly align the joint where it needs to be. That is the other benefit of using shape layers, or at least converting things to shape layers. So now that we've outlined all of our shapes, we can go ahead and start to move the anchor points to align them with the joints of the arm. So we can hit Y for the pan behind tool. You can click this little crosshair and move it over to the middle of this circle. If you hold Command or Control, you will get this to snap directly to the circle. And then we're going to do the same thing for the forearm. So if we select the forearm, hit Y. Ooh, I went back too far. Create shapes. Create shapes. Oop. Okay. So now that we have the bicep, we can use the pan behind tool by hitting Y on the keyboard, holding Command or Control. We can snap it directly to the middle of that circle right here. And then we can do the same with this forearm. So we can hit Y, we can slide this down, and then hold Control to lock it and snap it directly to the circle. And then the same for the hand. So if we go, it might get a little bit confused if you have too many things stacking over top of each other. So you can always drag this to the side, hit Y, and then anchor point to the center of that circle. So you'll notice that now that we've moved this, you can sort of aim to get it back in, but I'll show you first, because these two are also not aligned perfectly. So what we can do is with the selection tool by hitting V, we can click the anchor point to move the layer. And if we hold control like before, it does the same sort of snapping. And we can snap it directly to the center or as close as possible. And now when we rotate this arm, the joint is perfectly aligned, causing no sort of visual errors. So we can do the same with the hand. So we can use our selection tool to move the layer, hold control, and snap it to the circle. So now that they are perfectly aligned. So we have established the joints and where they rotate from. Now we are going to sort of connect them like an arm would. So if we select the bicep, or sorry, if we select the forearm, and we come down here to this parent and link section, we can click the little spiral tool, which is called a pick whip, and we can drag the blue line that it comes out of it to the bicep outline. So now the forearm and the bicep are connected. So if I move the bicep, you can see the forearm moves with it. You just want to undo to make sure that you have realigned everything. Make sure that the forearm is connected to the bicep, and then you can go to the hand, do the same thing, grab that pick whip tool and hit bicep or hit the forearm, and you'll see that this box has changed. You can also go in here and change them as you please. So now if you move the bicep, the hand and the forearm follow, and if you move the forearm, the hand will follow, and then the hand can rotate freely without much of an issue. That is the basis of rigging. You always want to make sure that your anchor point is where you want the rotation to be, and then you want to parent them like your hand or like an actual arm would be. The bicep, the forearm connected to the bicep, the hand connected to the forearm, and you get a nice little rigged character. Animating this character's wave is somewhat simple. This is building on what we learned last week and with the different graph editors and the different types of easing. With that, we can get started by selecting all of our layers, hitting R to bring up the rotation value, and hitting the stopwatch to lock in a pose. Now this pose is not the starting pose. So what we can do is we can select the 3 keyframes and slide them over so that we know that this is sort of the second position that we want things to be in. This is where the 2 different types of animating come in. You can either animate straight ahead, which is animating from one position to the next position to the next position, much like you would for moving a box or a title across the screen. Or we can do pose to pose, which is establishing the key points of the animation and then filling in the in-betweens as they sort of play out, or to make it feel proper. So for instance, if I wanted to do pose to pose, I would select these keyframes, right click them, and toggle hold keyframe. This stops them from actually animating. There's no in-betweens. It's just a pose. It is a locked down pose. So we have the second pose, which is this one. For the first pose, we want it to sort of mimic a resting position. Whoops. So we can move this arm down and move the forearm down to sort of create a resting position of the arm. And you'll notice that it has created a linear keyframe. So just make sure that you select your keyframes, right click, and toggle hold keyframe. This will now snap to that next position. Now, your arm doesn't usually snap, so in between these two, I'm going to create a sort of halfway pose of the arm lifting up. So now we have pose 1, pose 2, and pose 3. So from pose 3, we can sort of go forward, let's say 5 frames or so. And we're going to move this back that way. And then we're going to go maybe 5 frames forward, and we're going to go forward. And maybe we'll do 2 waves. So then move up about 5 frames again, move this backwards, and then we can animate the arm in the resting pose at the end. So to make it equal to how we started back here, what you can do is you can actually select these keyframes, go back to the end of your animation, hit Command C or Control C, and then hit Command or Control V to paste them, and we get our resting position again. So now he raises his hand, he waves, and then he puts it down. Again, we kind of need a in between of these 2 frames as your arm doesn't snap to the bottom. And let's just select the bicep and rotate it down. Maybe rotate this out a bit. And then we have a animation. This is a good point to sort of preview it and make sure that it feels right. You'll notice that the timeline is massive. So what we can do is we can go to 5 seconds on the timeline just by reading these numbers at the top. If you hit N, it will trim your work area to just 5 seconds, and we can right click this sort of highlighted top bar and trim comp to work area. So now we only have a 5-second timeline. So if we play it, you can see that it's pretty static, but things are sort of moving correctly. So I think what we can do is, at this stage, what I like to do is take your keyframes and sort of move them around. Oops. Sort of slide them around and preview it to see if it feels a bit better. Okay, so that's looking good. That feels a little bit quicker because we don't usually take that long to raise our arm. And then I'm going to move these over a bit more to establish a quicker motion of the wave. As when we wave, it sort of moves a bit quicker. We can see that it is starting to feel a bit more energetic because the time between these poses is a bit smaller. And then we want to just take these 2 frames and bring them back because it doesn't take that long for us to lower our arm. So we now have our small little animation. Next is to sort of bring this back into a linear animation. So if we select all of the keyframes that we've put down, we right click and go to toggle hold keyframe, it will convert them back to a linear animation. Now, if you play it, you can see there seems to be an error. And this can and has happened from some of the assignments that kind of popped up. As you can see with the bicep, we have 3 frames where the arm raises up, but then it immediately goes to this frame, which is when we are moving the arm back down. There's nothing in between to tell it to keep the arm sort of in the air. So all you have to do, much like how we copied these positions, is go back. You want to select this keyframe, which is the up position, and you want to copy and paste it here. So now you can see the arm stays up and goes down. So we have the basic semblance of we have a basic sort of outline for our animation. Again, this is linear. We do not want to use linear frames really for anything, as it looks very robotic. It doesn't have any of that flair that animation usually does. So for this, the next step is to jump into the graph editor. Again, you click this little button here and it converts your timeline to a graph editor. Now, if we select one of the rotations, you can see we have linear keyframes. So much like the other lesson, select all of your keyframes and hit this little button down here, which is the Easy Ease button. Now, you'll notice that there's a slight difference to this timeline. I am in the value graph. Again, to go into the value graph, you hit the options button beside the I and make sure that you are in the value graph. And once we apply that ease, you'll notice, well, something doesn't look right. We have little kinks in our animation where we once needed those frames to show it. But when you look at that animation, you now have this almost staggered position as the arm raises and lowers. And that is because we have these two keyframes, but we don't need them. You can visually tell that we are going from this keyframe down to this keyframe up to this keyframe. So we don't actually need anything in between because After Effects is sort of doing the work for us. So you can go ahead and delete these two keyframes and immediately the animation gets smoother. As the arm raises and lowers, it is moving more natural. Now, this is still a basic ease, and in real life, when someone moves their arm, there's a bit of a slow beginning, so we want to exaggerate that out. So by pulling that handle, we can exaggerate this out, and now when he raises his arm, it sort of moves a bit quicker, as we would. We can shorten this length just a little bit by moving these keyframes in towards each other. And then again, when we move our arm, we take a little bit more time to get that motion going. And you want to sort of slowly tweak these handles until that animation looks good. And for this, it looks pretty decent. So then you can move on to the forearm. When we select the forearm, if you don't see anything pop up on your screen, just hit this little magnifying glass and it will sort of lock your frames together, or it will focus on the keyframes on the timeline. So again, this is set to linear. So we're going to go in, we're going to select everything and hit this button down here. And now you can see we're having the same issue like before, where we had these extra keyframes that we wanted for when we were doing pose to pose. But now that After Effects is sort of doing the work for us, we don't need them as they are just causing some visual hitches in the animation. So for these two, we can get rid of. And now we have a slightly better animation and a slightly smoother wave as it goes up and then down. So again, as before, we want to sort of move this over so that it's a slower motion. And as we are coming into a somewhat of a resting position, we want to make this a bit longer so it sort of slowly gets up and then comes to a slight stop. We can slow it down a little bit here. We can just sort of, you just want to manipulate these anchor points to try to get a smooth motion. Now, maybe what we can do is move this over so that this motion here is a bit quicker. As when you come up, you kind of, when you're waving, you kind of hit that first pose in its own one sweeping arc. A good way to keep this up and to animate characters is to act them out yourself. You can record it and then sort of time it up to the same actions. You see that all over the place when you see demo reels or you see behind the scenes of animated features. You see the animators themselves acting the scenes out and then recreating and exaggerating all those motions within their programs. But it's all based off of something human first. So for this, it's looking good. We're kind of getting that motion and then he's waving. What we can do is maybe slow this down a bit and quicken this one up. So he starts the wave a bit quicker. We can move this over. And now we kind of have this nice little animation. I think that the wave might be a bit too slow. So what I'll do is I'll select this keyframe, bring it over, select this keyframe and bring it over. So now when he goes up, he waves. Okay, that might be a bit too quick. So you can always select these keyframes and just physically click the center and move them around to sort of get the right feeling for your animation. So I'm going to say maybe something like this. You always want to look for very smooth arcs, as this is the actual value being changed. So you want that motion to feel sort of smooth and fluid. So maybe he's taking a bit more time. So if you watch it, and then for the ending, we sort of have another hitch in this ending. So if we delete that keyframe, you can see that he raises his arm, waves, and then goes down. So that's a very basic animation for it. There is ways that we can improve it, which we will get into in a moment. But for the assignment, this is what we're tasked to do, and sort of the basis of using the value graph, changing anchor points, linking arms, and parenting things together so that you create sort of a chain of motion. And sort of this is how you animate a character, or realistically how you can use parenting to animate something in more elaborate or interesting ways. The examples in the overview of the stacked shapes, or the sort of title realistic example, those are very, very practical ways of using these parenting to get more elaborate animation out of it. Now, to clean up this animation, we can go back to the second lesson, which is the principles of animation. This sort of feels very robotic still. And what we can do is we can improve it by adding some of the principles of overshoot and anticipation, and sort of get that more character and more cartoony vibe to it. That is actually just real life, exaggerated out of the natural movements of a person. So with this, we have the arm kind of going up. And what I want to do is I want to sort of add in some sort of overlapping animation. So when you move your arm, your hand kind of goes limp, or it drags behind a little bit. So let's exaggerate that as it goes. So instead of this sort of quick bend, I'm going to move this first keyframe forward, which will cause the arm to sort of stay more of a straight arm, or closer to a straight full out arm than when we had it sort of already bent getting into that position. So it starts, and then as we're going, the hand sort of stays locked, like it's super rigid. But realistically, there's a little bit of play when you're moving your arm. So I'm going to animate that. I'm going to take this keyframe, which is our resting keyframe. I'm going to move it over. And then with this second keyframe, I'm going to move it sort of past this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to animate it so that it rotates the opposite way of where we're moving. And then as it goes up, it gets back into its normal position. But instead of it being locked in that straight position, I'm going to animate it going a bit further this way. And then once you apply your ease, which is selecting the keyframes and clicking this, or clicking F9, we can sort of exaggerate some of this movement to allow the hand to have this natural sort of almost flow to it. If you pay attention, you can see that the hand sort of drags a little bit behind the arm as it goes up and then gets into the position for that first wave. And then we just need to animate it sort of following that motion. So as it goes to this side and locks out into that wave here, we want to rotate it sort of like this. We're creating that same zigzag that we did for the forearm, but now we're offsetting it with the hand. So then the arm comes back. So this should come back over like so. And we're creating this sort of arcing motion. And then as the hand comes down, we want it to drag behind like it is right now. We can even exaggerate it, and I'll show you that in a second. And then it kind of rests back into its final position. So that is sort of how you add a little bit more character to your animation. But you'll notice that the subsequent sort of waves, they don't feel as good. So I'm going to show you a little tip to slow things down, as I think that this animation is moving a bit too quick. So if you select all of your keyframes and you hold Alt or Option, I believe, on Mac, and you click one of your last keyframes or the furthest keyframe on one of the sides, and you drag, you'll see that you proportionally slow your animation down. So it proportionally keeps the space between your keyframes the same, but allows you to extend your animation without having to manually move each keyframe. It's a very handy tip. If you feel something's too quick, you can always select the keyframes, hold Option or Alt, and then drag it out to sort of slow it down in a proportional manner. Now, if we play it, the arm is moving a bit slow, so I might grab this and move it. This is all extra. This is all just that fine tuning to make it more of our own rather than a very static or very generic motion to things. This is where you get that character, you get that little bit of extra effort put into it. So I find that these animations are a bit too quick, so I'm going to move these keyframes in so that the motion is still kind of quick going up and down, and that looks already a bit better. The motion is going much smoother as he's raising and lowering his arm. But you'll notice that now we're getting a little bit of an issue where the hand is driving or is in front of and moving in an unnatural way from the arm. So that is due to the keyframes not being aligned properly. This is another tip for animating multiple things together. And if you want to see them, instead of having to flip between these and getting them all sort of trying to get them all aligned, what you can do is you can lock one of the layers and hit this little icon beside your stopwatch. And what happens, before you locking the layer, you click that little icon and then you can lock the layer and select something else. And you'll notice that these are now showing two different keyframes. I can't select these as this is the locked layer, but I can reference it. I can see how that motion is going. And when I look through, okay, we're good here. So this is still following that sort of flow or overshoot or overlap animation. And as we get up here, we're good. I can maybe make it a bit longer so it holds a bit. But then as we move, we're starting to move into that second pose too quickly. So what we can do is we can just drag that out and maybe drag this out, as I know that that's the coming back pose that we don't want. And now you can see we're getting some lag in the hand. We're getting that overlap coming back. You can exaggerate it by pulling these handles. And what you can see is that it is now in the extreme pose the other way once we're fully extending the arm. And as we come back, it sort of snaps into that second position. And just by adjusting these keyframes and these anchor points, you can start to refine your animation and get this more smoother motion of the hand sort of waving. Again, following your own motion of your arm, you can sort of feel out your animation as I kind of keep doing in my little webcam view. So already, compared to where we were with the basic animation, we are getting a much smoother and fluid and more exaggerated motion to everything, which is great. I hope this helped, and I will continue to try to make these videos for everyone as a nice little recap and as a quick sort of repository, build this repository for you guys to look at. That's all. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. See ya.